Hey, good morning. It's 8 a.m. Pacific time, Monday, July 21st, 2025. Sorry, it's early. It's Monday. It's our first episode of the Tea on Security. And our topic today is You Can't Protect What You Can't See. I'm Sarah Spencer, founder of CogniMind AI and the developer of Valkyrie, a security platform, and I'm here for a powerful conversation about visibility, security, and the hidden risks lurking in your infrastructure. Sorry, I forgot to turn notifications off. Rookie mistake. Again, our first episode. Next week on July 29th, we'll have Dr. Joe Perez to talk about data. And he's been our fractional CTO since we started our MSP Solentech in 2019. So that'll be an exciting conversation, and you won't get bored with just having me here. I wanted to go over like the week's cybersecurity threats first thing. That way, people that are trying to get to work need to know what's coming up in the pipeline, what to be watchful for. There's a couple vulnerabilities out this last week. Talk about nothing too specific or detailed, but initially I will go over cybersecurity vulnerabilities and threats first thing at 8 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. I know I'm kind of joining the party late on the East Coast, but doing what I can. Anyway, today we're going to talk about visibility from blind spots in your tech stack to overlooked telemetry. We're going to spill the real tea on why transparency is the first step in bulletproofing your business from cyber threats. And whether you're leading a SOC team, managing compliance, or just trying to keep your organization safe, I think you'll get something out of this episode. So set a reminder every Monday, 8 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. I'll go live. Send me your questions ahead of time. I'm not sure what's going on with the chat. Like I said, I'm kind of a newbie, so I'll fix out all the bugs from the lessons learned. Anyway, my experience is I've been in IT for 25 plus years. I started my career at EA.com when I was about 22 years old as a junior Unix systems administrator on Solaris in the NOC. Then I went on to run a boutique IT company, MSP, for probably 10 years, 2006 to about 2015, so just shy of 10 years. And then I went to work for Cisco, and the last position I had at Cisco was an information security architect. I worked on the infrastructure team as a security engineer too at Cisco. I also worked in CMS as a network engineer. So I left Cisco in September of 2019 to start my MSP, thinking I can bootstrap the SaaS, which is Valkyrie. Anyway, we just ended up getting so enthralled in the MSP and MSSP business that the SaaS product kind of was an afterthought. So I recently offloaded my MSSP company April 30th this year, so fairly recently, and jumping out the gate to release Valkyrie finally. I have an ISO 27001 internal auditor cert. Well, it's probably expired. All my certs are expired. Anyway, you know the game. Anyway, so I have ISO, CMMC. I've done a lot of work with government contractors since I've been in North Carolina for the past 7 years. I'm back in California with my grandkids, so that's awesome. Anyway, I don't want to bore you with my background, but I just wanted to let you know who I am and who's giving you this information. So one of the things worth watching is rising state-backed threats, and we've been seeing a rise in these threats. Um, Anytime there's something going on politically, we're going to see an uptick in state-backed threats. There's just nothing we can do about it. But North Korea's IT infiltration led to 29 laptop farms raided across the U.S. I mean, this is coming from Business Insider, Wired.com, Mapletronics.com, and 15 others. Iranian-linked hacking groups continue to pose a serious threat. We've seen an uptick, especially since the tensions between the U.S. and Iran. And we saw a huge uptick during the alleged ceasefires. So it's something to note of that political climate does impact cybersecurity. And this is coming from Axio.com, AP News, Industrial Cyber, about the uptick of Iran posing serious threats and targeting our critical infrastructure. Oh, wow. What about the airlines? So that's another huge spot right now in cybersecurity is airline security. So Scattered Spider targets airlines. This notorious hacking group previously tied to large-scale breaches has recently shifted focus to the airline industry, using social engineering to infiltrate help desk. And so that brings me to another point, like learning management and user awareness training. It's important, especially for tier one, your first line of defense, to understand social engineering and how not to become a victim of social engineering. So having tight controls about how information can be given, who it can be given to, and ways that information can be relayed. So it's not enough to say, well, only the information security architect or the technical leader can drive the decision making in certain issues. Like think tier four, escalations. You have to have a communication plan. How can that communication um, commence? Because there have been use cases where the who wasn't enough. So only from the CEO, and then help desk gets an email from the CEO, but it's from his or her personal Gmail account. And that Gmail account was compromised, and now a threat actor has control of it. So the tier one help desk individual may think that they're talking to the CEO when in fact they're talking to a bad actor. So having a communication plan on how that communication can commence, because if you have a data breach that's impacting your email, you need to have secondary communication because you're not going to be communicating over email, especially if the bad actor is inside the email eavesdropping on that conversation, right? So these are things to think about. AI-powered fraud is on the rise, obviously, since AI is on the rise. Deep fake and generative AI scams are exploding, and they're becoming harder and harder to tell whether they're fake or not. And this is just going to increase as time goes on and AI becomes more trained, right? So there's fake videos, calls tricking employees into transferring large sums of money. They look very real. They talk. They interact with you. So, we're going to have to add these kind of things into our learning management systems for our user awareness and user education training. And phishing attacks. So, like phishing attacks are over voice-based phishing. These are also surging after the recent attacks on Qantas. Be on the guard for imposter calls, especially for threat actors like Scattered Spider for the airlines. And 5 simple things that you can do to ensure that you're more secure because you're never 100% secure, right? It's like trying to keep a moving target secure. Enable multi-factor authentication everywhere, especially on critical systems. Email, that's an obvious one. Social media accounts aren't so obvious though. But it's really important. Multi-factor authentication everywhere, especially banking, critical infrastructure. Um, but in the business environment, you should have multi-factor authentication enabled everywhere. It's just common sense. And, you know, I hear this a lot, like the extra step, the time it takes, but nowadays it's just like a push button and you're off to the races. Just keep in mind if you change your phone or anything like that, change your multi-factor authentication first before getting rid of that phone. I like Google Authenticate. I like Google Authenticator because I can transfer it anywhere and my passwords and my logins will go. With Microsoft, I have to re-register on my app. So if I deleted the app and tried to install it on a new phone, even if I logged into it, it's not going to pull all of my things over. So um, train your teams to spot deepfake and voice-based social engineering attacks. Monitor vendor and third-party systems closely. They're prime targets for state actors. So this is becoming more and more of a priority for auditors and certification bodies like ISO and standard bodies like NIST. We're not doing enough to monitor vendor and third-party systems. You know, there's so many times I go help people get ready for their ISO audit or do their internal audit. And I'm like, where's your Microsoft contract? Where's your, SolarWinds contract? And the reason why those are important is because in an incident, we need to be able to get those contracts to see what the terms and conditions are of our partnership and what happens if, for example, my customer's information gets breached because of a third party vulnerability. And then you want to do a risk analysis on third parties before you bring them into your stack. And it's really important. And a lot of people don't do this. And I know a lot of startup companies want to support other startup companies. And it's okay to take a company that's not very mature security wise. Like, for example, maybe they don't have an ISO 27001, but you need to know where they're at. Like, what are their plans for ISO 27001? What are they doing to make sure that, customer data is being secured? Who are their sub-processors? They're questions that you can ask to know where their maturity, their security maturity is. So that's really important. Stay alert during geopolitical or tech tensions. These often coincide with cyber activity spikes. So we already mentioned that, like with the political climate, with the attack on Iran, of course, we're going to see an uptick on cyber threats to our critical infrastructure. So that's what I have for you this week. Nothing specific. Next week, I'll get into specific CVEs and what to watch for. And then if there's more sophisticated threats that are in the wild and there's some POCs and research data that we can provide you, we'll post that on our subreddits and our websites and those kind of things. Right now, I'm just on YouTube Live. As I learn this podcasting and streaming business, I'll make sure to push everything out to Twitch, Discord, Twitter, X, and wherever else I can stream or push this out. I'll just push the recording or the YouTube out to those channels because, again, not knowing what I don't know, I couldn't get the recording function on Streamlabs to work. So if anybody can help me, I'd say put it in the chat, but that's the problem, right? Anyway, let's talk about visibility. See if I missed anything. I'm going to talk about visibility, um, probably mostly in reference to ISO 27001, even though most of the standards frameworks, and if you don't know what a standards framework is, ISO, NIST, they're the standard bodies that publish all these standards for a certain topic. So ISO 27001 is information security, and then we have NIST and CMMC and HIPAA and then state and GDPR. These are all standards frameworks. So they tell you um, what controls, not how. So it doesn't tell you how to implement the controls, but you have to meet the standard with any control that you implement, right? And so that's a business decision. You're kind of looking at the risk reward payoff. Um, how much is this data worth? How much is the hardware worth or the resources worth that I'll lose, the asset? Um, if it were to get breached and I lost everything, versus uh, the cost to implement the control. So it's always a trade-off. That's why we say we're never 100% secure, and then there's always um, the moving target, right? A lot of times we're protecting stuff in point in time, which is changing the next minute, the next hour. Um, and then technology is moving extremely fast right now with the onset of AI. And then there's like shadow IT because you can't protect what you can't see. And a lot of times we have a hard time keeping track of assets and um, getting them in the system. And when you're dealing with a large enterprise and you have millions and millions of systems and hundreds of thousands of users, both internal and external, it becomes a spider web of Excel spreadsheets and multiple tools and multiple stakeholders to um, maintain all of these assets. So that's part of the reason it's really hard to get your asset um, inventory or asset management under control, but it's very important. So visibility, like I said, it's not just a security principle, it's a compliance requirement. ISO 27001, one of the most widely recognized standards for information security management systems, mandates clear visibility into your assets, access, and vulnerabilities. And yet shadow IT continues to grow in the dark. I'll give you a quick little story. When I was at Cisco, somebody reported a internal vulnerability. And they said, hey, I'm just, I don't know who he was or who reported it, but like, hey, I found a modem in an electrical cabinet. And you think like a little rectangle hole in the wall, with a door on it. They're not like the electrical cabinets you have at home, but there was some depth there. And there was a modem, a cable modem in there. And so the team was using this cable modem to circumvent the security controls on the firewall. And they were going out to the internet with this modem. So that's considered shadow IT, right? We don't know that this IT exists. Or it could be a system that's plugged into the network that's not put in um, the inventory system, didn't go through the proper controls to onboard the system into the network. So one of the controls for visibility, now I'm going to go into the clauses in the standard in reference to ISO 27001. And this will map over several other standards like HIPAA and NIST and CMMC. You must maintain an accurate and up-to-date inventory of all information assets. This includes endpoint servers, cloud workloads, and user devices. So here's a hot take. You can't secure what you didn't even know was plugged in. If your asset inventory is in a spreadsheet, you're already behind. So one of the things I had auditors complaining a lot about last year when I was in the middle of audits for my clients, because we're the managed service provider. So a lot of times we get pulled into those audits. is bespoke inventory management. So you have your mobile device management. So you tell the auditor, well, all my mobile devices are in the MDM and all of my servers are in this other inventory system. And my people are in this inventory system. And my data and my software and my third parties are in this inventory management system. And one of the auditors was in IT for like 35 years. She was very brilliant. She knew a lot about IT. You could tell that she knew it more than just from a theoretical perspective. This woman worked in IT. Yet she kept saying, you have to have all your inventory in a central repository. And I'm thinking to myself, this isn't realistic in an enterprise or in many companies. Like, this team manages the inventory for the MDM, the mobile device management system. They deal with mobile devices. That's where the inventory lives. Then, the engineering team, their servers, their critical infrastructure, and then you have labs. And so that's a challenge. And then because there's so much data, and you're talking about millions of systems in a lot of these organizations and enterprises, the data is not human consumable. So you have to find a way to make this inventory human consumable, how to onboard it into inventory, how to make it visible to the people that need to see it. And then there has to be policy, and that policy has to be practiced. You have to practice getting your information from a source of truth. And one thing I'm just going to say about entering inventory into any system, there has to be a throat to choke. There has to be an owner. So I want to know who owns the system, whose throat am I going to choke, and then who's responsible for remediating any vulnerabilities. So who's the risk owner, right? So make sure you add those two fields. Next, the acceptable use of assets. Now, this is going to be in your acceptable use policy. It's a very important policy. And one way I drove security at Cisco was I would get a phone call. Hey, Sarah, we need to test these Wi-Fi routers that are, in testing. Can we just plug them into the internet? How do we access the network for testing? And obviously, not my caper, so I'm going to kick that to somebody else. But before I do, I always ask the person, well, what does the acceptable use policy say? What does the network policy say? Because that's going to give the user a lot of information as far as contacts or how to proceed further, because they need to open a ticket and they need to start the process. They're on step 10 and they really need to be on step 1. And then plus sending them back to the policy, it gets the user to read the policy again if they never have. They get to read it for the first time. They get to solve their own problem. And it drives a culture of policy. Policy drives decision making. Because if you just have a whole bunch of policies and they just sit there, but nobody ever reads them, and it's the team leads or the senior people or the tier 4 people driving the decision making, that's not scalable, right? Because Sarah might get hit by a bus, or what's more than likely is Sarah goes to another team or on to another adventure. So you need to drive policy driven decisions. And the way to do that is like, hey, that's a really good question. Have you read the acceptable use policy yet? And then the user can find out for themselves. And then if they still have questions, obviously come to us. And then we can find out where our policy missed, so we can find ways to make that policy better for a user like this guy in the future. And then we can have a meaningful conversation because we're both coming from the same place, right? Which is the policy. Employees need to understand what's allowed and what isn't. BYOD policies. I didn't even think of that. I wasn't reading my notes. SaaS tools, shadow file sharing apps. And the control is your guardrail. So bring your own device policies. A lot of companies, even up to last year, I didn't see a lot of BYOD policies. And these were from companies that were startups that a lot of people use their own laptops. So it's really important to have a policy that says what you can do with your own device on a company network. And a real world problem for acceptable use of assets is shadow IT, like unauthorized file sharing platforms or AI tools, can exfiltrate sensitive data before your SIM even notices. So, when you give that app permissions, um, or accept their terms and conditions when you start using that app, especially if it's a desktop app, especially if it's installed on your device. Um, a lot of these things can, read your contacts, read your information. So be cognizant of that, especially if you're installing it on a work device. And then we have identity and authentication. This isn't just about passwords, it's about visibility into who is accessing what, when, from, and where. So poor visibility equals access creep. It's really important to have automation set up for access. If you're using Microsoft 365 or Google, whoever your identity, if you don't have a third party identity access like SSO, and you're just using M365 or Google or whatever you're using, you want to make sure that you're getting those notifications. For example, in Valkyrie, I set up a feature that if John was logging in from Nigeria and logging in from San Jose within a time frame that he could not possibly be in Nigeria, it would send a notification to the security analyst. Or if John hasn't logged in for 30 days, any anomalies on his account, when's the last time he changed his password, things like that. What was the last system he logged into? In certain companies, you want to log the hours that they're logging in. So you can start getting behavioral analysis on the person. So you can start building a baseline of what's normal for the user. And then at least get notifications for if there's an anomaly in that behavior. Implement federated identity, enforce MFA. And when we say federated identity, we're talking about SSO, things like one login. Enforce MFA and monitor for dormant or overprivileged accounts. So you want to make sure that you have that real-time user behavior mapping. And the tool that I built, that was one of the most important things that we started working on first. Monitoring activities. So ISO 27001 requires that you monitor systems, networks, and user activities. And we're not just talking about SIM data. It includes endpoint detection, data flows, and cloud access. Audit logs are meaningless, A, if they're siloed, and B, if they're never looked at. So again, and I know you engineers know this, there's a lot of telemetry data coming at us very fast, and we only have so much bandwidth. So we spend a lot of times making those playbooks and log parsers. But again, it's a moving target because things change so fast. So setting up automation that can do this for you. And then now with AI, it's awesome because AI learns. And I'm not saying to let the black boxes make all the decisions. I'm just saying it's helping us because it's repeatable, it's measurable, and then it's also sending us to the target versus us having to have alert fatigue because we have so many notifications coming in, and if they're false positives for the same alert, like by the 10th time the real alert comes for that same notification, we're probably ignoring it. And then we have to log into 5 or more systems just to get the information we need. and then you get login fatigue because you're like, oh my God, I just don't want to look at, you know. So this automation is really important. And with AI, the automation learns. So I think it's really cool um, how these systems are going to evolve in the future. Shadow IT, the Phantom Menace. Shadow IT is the unauthorized use of apps, tools, or hardware by employees, often to get work done faster, but it can lead to data exfiltration via unsanctioned apps, unpatched vulnerabilities and rogue devices, and compliance violations from unknown data processors. Because we all know that if, well, not all of us, but anybody that's gone through ISO 27001, right? Or that's really mature or further along in their maturity for cybersecurity, we list our sub-processors for data. It's part of GDPR. Like we need to know where our customers' data is going, whether it's for ours or if it's being transferred to a third party. So that's why we list our sub-processors. Over 45% of SaaS usage in the average enterprise is now shadow IT. That's nearly half of your attack surface, invisible. And why? Because companies are giving the people the what you need to do. But rarely do I see enterprises, organizations, or companies tell their employees the why and the how. A lot of times they don't even give them a budget for the how. It's like they want this magic unicorn, but they don't want to pay for it. So what do IT people do? What do engineers do? They go using open source. They go find solutions. At Cisco, we would buy a off-the-shelf product, a COT, a commercially off-the-shelf product, and it would be broken. And what would we do? We'd build another system to make that system work the way we want it to work. So now we just created more shadow IT. It's, yeah. So how to prevent IT the Sarah Spencer or the Valkyrie way? Continuous discovery. You've got to monitor DNS, authentication, and outbound traffic to detect new apps, but you got to run those algorithms against other algorithms because otherwise it's just more telemetry coming in that's not human consumable. So I want to know how all of these things relate together, right? I want to see the information from the vulnerability management agents and the anti-malware, antivirus on the system, the SIM telemetry, the telemetry coming from the switches and the routers, all of this telemetry, and then enumerate it so we can see the attack surface real time. Educate users. People don't think this is important. This is the first thing to get cut in companies. It's the last thing to get funded. Educate users. Frame security as an enabler, not an obstacle. Give them safe, sanctioned alternatives. And then listen to them when they say they don't have the tools to do what you need them to do. What I used to do as a security engineer on the infrastructure team, and it was kind of weird because I was an engineer, but I was being trained to be an architect. So they were like pulling me off of, collaborative engineering projects. But because I still was in that engineering mindset, I would create the solution and I would show it to the engineers. And then before I knew it, I would have like this hackathon mentality where everybody was trying to come up with the same kind of solutions for different problems. Um, and it just created this very like teamwork makes the dream work. It was never like, here comes Sarah with the big stick. It was like, oh yeah, it's going to be fun. Like, how can we do this? Because I have the same mission as you, right? It's just I need it to be done securely, whereas you need it to be done fast. You need it to work, basically. Policy and enforcement, automate enforcement via CAS, endpoint agents, or firewall rules. So again, you want those policies, and we're talking about technical policies now. You want those policies enabled automagically. So having the firewall, oh my gosh, you're not going to believe it, audits. You wouldn't believe how many companies, whether in the cloud or on-prem, don't have firewalls. Anyway, I digress. And map it to controls. So you want to map these to all the controls. You want to map all the controls to all the standards and regulation you need to meet. And so that you can see where your Valkyrie does this for you automatically. So that when you go to the audit, you know what your statement of I can't say this word. Oh my God. Ac, 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 I'm not even going to try because I don't know why I can't say it. It's too early for me. I'm not used to getting up this early. I'm still on East Coast time. Um, know which controls are oh my God, I'm retarded. Seriously. Sorry I said that word. I'm gonna get banned on YouTube before I go out the gate. Anyway, which controls apply to you? So map those. And then Valkyrie just has a button that will do it for you. It'll map everything. Um, so here's a closing thought. It's only 8:36, finished ahead of time. I'll get better at this. I'm gonna go watch how terrible of a dumpster fire this was and attempt to get my lessons learned and make these better and then stream them out to all the places. Visibility is the foundation of trust, and trust is the foundation of compliance. You don't have to choose between compliance and capability. When you have platforms like Valkyrie, you get both because real-time visibility isn't luxury, it's a necessity. And it's so important to have AI explainability and to be able to safeguard against, you know, quantum and AI in the future, the speed at which it's going to be able to put pattern recognition and to do pattern recognition and also crack, the current, and there's a lot of good people working on this right now. Cryptology is going to be huge in the future. So anyway, I'll be more prepared next time, or not prepared, but you know, we'll get better and better as we go along. So thank you for tuning in. It's been fun, and I hope this was insightful at the least. Bye.